Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial series on our channel. Hopefully you're doing great and you are ready for a new tutorial that we have installed for you. In this tutorial series we are going to be talking about testing. So every Spring Boot application that you build, you should have some tests for it. It's really a nice thing to have, and most of the big projects, or I should say all of the big projects have some tests, have some unit tests, have some integration tests, REST tests, end-to-end tests, all kind of different things that really help you out to maintain your project and to make sure that you don't accidentally break something while you're developing a new feature or even while you're doing a bug fix. I can't even think about how many times I was trying to fix something, but I ended up breaking a couple of other things, and luckily the tests that I had caught that. So what we are going to do is we are here at a Spring Initializer web page where I can create some simple Spring project, and I have a couple of things set up here. I'm using Java as a language, and it's a Gradle project with some Spring Boot version, doesn't really matter. All of this thing here doesn't matter. I'm just using the Java 11 version, which I have. Again, you can go with 8, doesn't really matter that much. From the dependencies, I have Spring Data JPA and I have Spring Web. So this is something that we are going to take a look at later on in some of the other videos, but for now, just add them, or you can also add them later, doesn't really matter. And just generate the project and import it in your IDE. I'm using IntelliJ, so I've just imported it there. Once you have imported it inside of your IDE, the project should look something like this. You will have a name of your application in the main module, and in the test module, okay, sorry, didn't want to open that. And in the test module, you will have some package name that you have set on the web page, and again, this testing application test class. So depending on how you name your application, it may be named differently. If you want to execute this, if you want to run the test, what you can do is just click here and this will actually start it. So this is an integration test. So here it says Spring Boot test. So it will try to load an application context. And as you can see, it fails. So you can see that here it says fail to load application context. And there is like some nice fancy error that if you take a look at, actually here, you can see that it says fail to configure data source. Basically what is missing is connection to the database. It doesn't know what to use. So you need some kind of database when running your integration tests. What you can use for Spring Boot is called H2. So H2 is an in-memory database that you can use for your tests, and it's actually quite useful. So if you go to the build Gradle, so if the main Gradle file, which you can find if I double click here, you can find here. So it's under the root folder. There is a build Gradle file, and in the dependencies, you don't have to change anything. So these are the tools that I mentioned that you should add eventually. We have here our test implementation, and you also want to add this line. So test implementation, the H2 database. And if I click refresh, so this will refresh all of my Gradle dependencies, we'll download this one. And once it's done, it's actually quite fast. If I run it, you should be able to see that now this test passes. And yeah, there it is. So our test has passed. It doesn't really actually test anything. So there's just one test here that doesn't do anything, but that's not important. What I want to show you now is how you can test something. So let's go to our main module. Let's go to the Java folder, to our package, and let's create a new package. Let's call it service. So this is where we are going to be putting our services. So let's create a new Java class, and let's name it something like, I don't know, service. Let's name it user service. So our user service will have some annotation, which annotates it as a service. So this is a Spring annotation telling Spring that this is a service class. And let's create some method in it. So let's public. So we have a user service class with a hello world method. Hello world method just returns a string hello world. Now let's create some tests for this. In our testing module, so in our test module, and again under Java, we have the same package name. Let's create our service package. Keep in mind that you do not have to do that, so you can actually put the tests wherever you want, but it's just a nice practice. And now let's create a new class and name it user service test. And that's it. We don't need any annotations except here for our actual test. And let's name this hello world test. Now let's try to run this. Let's just run this user service test and see what happens. Yeah, it has been run in 2 seconds and it passed. We can see here test passed 1. Perfect. Before we get into testing the user service, let's see how we can do some assertions. So assertions are basically checks that verify that something is something that you expect. So you have an actual value and you have an expected value, and you want to assert that the values match or do not match or something like that. Imagine you had a method, a Boolean method that returns true or false in some cases, and you want to check that outcome. So what you can do here is you can use assertions. So let me show you how you can do that. For example, in that Boolean method, which would return a Boolean, true, false, you want to assert that the actual value, so this is where your method would go, is something. So is true, is false, is whatever, and this comes from this assertj library. So the assertj library can really help you with the assertion, so this is something nice that we can use. And basically if we run this test, it should basically pass because we are asserting that true is true, it should always be. And now if you want to make it fail, we can say here false. So we want to assert that false is true, which is not the case, and our test should fail. And you can see here that our test failed. We have test failed 1, passed 0, blah blah, and here it just gives you the outcome and tells you which test actually failed. But if you go to your test itself, you can see that expecting value to be true but was false. So it was expecting this to be true because we stated it like that here, but it was actually false. Now what we want to do is we want to check our user service. We want to check the method that we have here. So how do we do that? The first thing that we want to do is we want to create an instance of our service. Since this is just a unit test, we don't need any fancy context loading or whatever. We can just create it ourselves. And also, since there are no dependencies inside of this service, so we are not linked to any other service, we can just leave it as it is and go here. So here we have before each, meaning that this will be run before every test that you have inside of this class. So if you had multiple tests, this or whatever you put inside of here will be executed before. For example, if you had some I don't know, some list of some things that you are verifying usually, and you want to clear it before each test, this is a place where you can do it. So you can say before each, and it would be cleared before each test starts. So what we are doing here is we are going to create a new instance of the user service before each test. And then we can go in our hello world test and we can say assert that service hello world is equal to, and now some string that we expect. Let's put something like this. This should fail because the hello world does not return this. And if we run the test, we would see that. And here you would run all of the tests. And if you want to just run this one, we have only one, so it doesn't really matter. But if you had multiple of them and you want to run just one, you can do it directly here on the test. And let's see, and it says, yeah, expected xxx, but was hello world. So this was the outcome of that method. And if we go and change that and then rerun this, now the test should pass. And yeah, as you can see, the test has passed. We have asserted that this method here returns blah blah. What you also can do is, for example, the null check. Let's do that also. So if we move here and put this in a variable, probably doesn't really make sense in this example, but let's just go over it. So here we do additional check. We are asserting that hello world is not null, and then we are asserting that it's equal to hello world string. And again, if we run all of our tests, so just this one test, you can see that they pass. So it's a quite simple test. This is just an intro on assertions. And yeah, So this would be everything for this video. So I hopefully you are able to follow this through and there are no issues. If you have some, please do let me know, write it down in the comments, and then we can talk about it and maybe try to solve them. So let's just recap really fast what we did. We have checked out our application. So we created a new application on the Spring Initializer web page with these dependencies, this configuration. We have opened it up in the IntelliJ IDE. Before we started to run our test, we went to the build Gradle file and we have added this test implementation. So we have added the dependency to the H2 database so that we can run our integration tests with the in-memory database. And we have created a new package called service with the user service class inside, which is annotated with that service and has one method called hello world. Again, in the test module, we have created a service package with the user service test, and there we have done this. What we have done here is we created an instance of the user service in the add before each. So in this setup method, which is run before each of the tests that we have here, we have just one, doesn't really matter. And we have created a new instance of the service, and in our test we have verified that the outcome of this method is not null and that it is equal to hello world. Yeah, quite simple. So this would be everything. Hopefully you are enjoying this tutorial, and yeah, I will see you in the next one.